Report on a journey to the western states of North America and a stay of several years along the Missouri during the years 1824 to 1827. By Gottfried, Duden. Preface. Number 1. I herewith present to my fatherland a report on my sojourn of several years in the interior of North America. Whatever motivates people to emigrate en masse can be regarded with indifference only by unthinking people. Some public speeches have already been made on the subject to the Germans. Well-considered advice and passionate bombast have alternately appealed to the sympathies of the friends of the German people and to humanity in general. However, until now, the matter has by no means been settled, and in this respect I, at the very least, must not be afraid that I have undertaken something superfluous. Even the title of the publication justifies the reader in expecting this not to be a collection of notes gleaned from European or American books. These are personal experiences, to which I should like to direct the attention of my country for the benefit of innumerable fellow men. Experiences that will seem new in various respects even to those who have read all the works about North America that have appeared in Europe up to the present. If experiences in general bear the characteristics of the individual who has had them, this is particularly true of those experiences that touch so closely upon human inclinations and disinclinations, and all the wishes based upon them. Who will expect unbiased evidence from a prejudiced person, and who may call himself unprejudiced in a similar situation? Who can consider himself to be completely impartial when he judges distant lands in order to answer the question of whether emigration is advisable? He would have to be a stranger on the whole earth, and yet also be able to make decisions concerning interests that develop only by residence in definite places on the earth. If, therefore, a complete lack of bias is inconceivable, a reporter who wishes his judgment to produce an effect commensurate with its basic value is obligated to acquaint the reader with the nature of his criterion. He must indicate the characteristics of the inner eye by which he has measured before he presents the conclusions he has reached. This is what I propose to do in this preface. The decision to depart from one's home country and to choose a distant part of the earth as one's new home is, except in cases of most urgent need and passionate frenzy, among educated people a result of manifold thoughts and emotions. It is clear enough that in order to give advice in such a crisis, it is not sufficient that one has seen the country where the new home is located. Above all, the adviser must be capable of understanding the situation of a hard-pressed man, and to judge accurately in what way the home country is at fault in order to decide the important preliminary question as to whether anything is actually to be gained by the change. This requires the ability to understand the various circumstances in their ultimate basis, as well as in their dependence on education and manner of living, which create an interest in existence here on earth. This is certainly a requirement that, thoroughly evaluated, would discourage many from writing about emigration. Fortunately, the author had to meet the same requirement in an investigation, the results of which he published a few years ago under the title Concerning the Fundamental Differences of the States. At that time, as can be gathered from the publication alluded to, he spent much time and effort on it and felt the satisfaction, long before he started on his journey, of being justified in considering himself prepared in this respect. Please remember that I am trying to suggest to the reader the characteristics of the inner eye that recorded the experiences of the New World. In my earlier thinking, I had become convinced that most of the evils from which the inhabitants of Europe, and particularly those of Germany, suffer are due to overpopulation, and are such that they cannot effectively be alleviated without first achieving a decrease in population. I realize that while a certain density of population is absolutely essential for the successful development of the individual and the state, overpopulation will distort social conditions in an unfortunate manner. Regardless of all the resistance of intellectual powers, overpopulation can only end by changing the state into a universal institution of coercion. Stones and other inanimate masses can change their places only through mechanical and chemical impulses. Animals follow their instincts, and primitive peoples resemble them very closely. Only that which has a direct salutary effect on their physical needs can have any influence on them. It is evident enough that when such people are influenced to emigrate, nothing is less responsible than the results of careful consideration. The old states of Asia, Africa, and Europe encouraged immigration before hunger forced individuals to it. At that time, nature effected its eternal purposes through reason. It is not difficult to guess why it has made use of other means among the younger nations. A journey to distant countries, to different climates, across wide oceans, was never excluded from my life plan, but a more urgent interest was associated with similar considerations. I myself was in the midst of the evils of overpopulation. Stimulated by the process of education and the events of the times, I had made the conditions of men and the characteristics of the states the subject of many years of investigation. It was not in my power, when I could understand the situation clearly, to veil an offensive reality with fiction. And, as I have said, since I had realized that the reason for most of the evils was overpopulation, nothing is easier to understand than my interest in the almost instinctive emigration of so many groups, whereby the eternal powers themselves indicate the cause of the sickness. The main direction taken by these oppressed people was toward the states of North America. I pursued them from a distance. In my home, I read the various reports and evaluations of such undertakings. I read a goodly number of older and more recent publications about North America itself, about the topography of the country, the climate, the vegetation, and the animals, as well as about the inhabitants and their political institutions. I proceeded on the basis of the idea that a European in the new country must at first make his lot dependent on nature and consider utilization of the soil as the actual basis of his life there. That, to be sure, some individuals could plan to earn a livelihood for themselves through crafts, technical industry, teaching, and the practice of medicine. That caution, however, would force one to consider an agricultural basis as the only sure one, and that emigration in mass could undoubtedly be based upon this alone. Therefore, I hope to find in the publications on North America and on emigration special information on this point. I hope to learn, 1, what area of this large territory was best suited for Germans, in regard to climate, fertility, cost of land, as well as accessibility to waterways. 2, how a settlement could actually be made in the forests and plains in the so-called wilderness, for what difficulties, expenses, inconveniences, and dangers one must be prepared, and 3, with what degree of likelihood would all of these obstacles be overcome. A, what could one expect in general in regard to the necessities of life? What relationship ordinary unskilled labor would have to this, and how large a fortune one must have not to be dependent on physical activity. B, what protection there was against illness, against wild animals, against hostile men, especially the Indians. C. What prospects were offered for the care of children? D. What could be expected for the stimulation of the mind, especially in regard to social intercourse and the education of children? Finally, what the relationship of family life was to public life and of the individual to the totality, to the nation. Searching for an answer to these questions, I found some information in various books, only not the information I was looking for. One type of publication did not seem to be adapted for instruction merely because the authors seemed to have written, as one says, out of the fullness of their hearts, instead of on the basis of calm judgment, and because the excited state of mind of the writers was revealed all too clearly to the critical reader. In one work I discovered a very exalted state of mind, which was constantly overflowing with poetic embellishments and extravagant praise. In another, a pessimistic attitude, which gave a depressing character to all descriptions. The attitude expressed in the first type was due mostly to an enthusiastic partiality for the political institutions of the North Americans. The pessimistic frame of mind was, on the other hand, usually the result of the writer's disappointed hopes. America was supposed to offer them treasures that Europe had unjustly denied them. In America, intellectual powers that were not appreciated in the home country were to find brilliant recognition. What is more natural than to pour out one's grief over the failure of such plans and complaints about the land and its inhabitants? Just as it is, on the other hand, to view everything concerning the new home as surrounded, as it were, with a blissful charm when chance has led one to the lap of abundance and joy after one's arrival. We experience it daily when the same surroundings sometimes seem cheerful and attractive, sometimes dreary and repelling, according to whether our inner mirror is clear or dimmed. And yet only a few people are capable of judging the pleasant and the unpleasant according to its dependence on the change in their own natures. Therefore, many emigrants were astonished to find evils in a distant country that they had long been familiar with and had thought to escape. They did not sense that they had brought these evils with them in their own personalities. Individuals who describe objects as they are reflected in their own state of mind cannot be accused of any evil intentions, however much their descriptions may deviate from the truth. The reporter acts entirely in accordance with his own nature when he describes his impressions as he has experienced them. His judgment is therefore no less subject to doubt. This is especially true of all the emigrants who return quickly from a very large country to their homeland. Who can expect an accurate account from someone who is overcome by bitter regret as soon as he enters a new environment? Aside from all the unfamiliar, unpleasant details, the glorified memories of the past restrict his receptiveness so strongly that for him only a dreary picture of the present is possible. Even the most charming aspects of the New World must appear as if seen through a gloomy mist. The less the sacrifice of the whole undertaking is for an emigrant, the more freely he will move in a foreign country. However, if the long duration of his voluntary residence does not counteract the yearning for his homeland, he is nevertheless not to be confused with the mere spectator, who, without giving up his country, undertakes an exploratory journey.